Right. How good are we at recruiting new ringers? And what do we need to do to make the recruitment process more effective?
Very interesting question. There's a follow-up question also related, and Paul Flavel's going to ask that one. Where are you, Paul? There we are.
Hello. I've been concerned for some time that I think as in Central Council, we spend an awful lot of time discussing rules and methods and deliberating on things which are, let's say, not relevant to 90% of grassroots ringers. And I think we ought to put a lot more effort into recruitment and training. And my question is, how can the Central Council change its ways to become much more focused on recruitment and training?
Okay, so it's not just recruitment and training, it's also the Central Council, our favourite topic. Excellent. I'm going to ask Pip to start answering that one.
Well, the answer...
Don't forget the microphone.
Don't forget the microphone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, basically, the answer is no, we're not good enough at recruitment. Because if we were, we would have as many ringers as we want. But we also haven't been terribly good at retention. And we have to address why we aren't very good at retention. What do people want when they pursue an activity? They want to basically, initially when they come along, they want to have fun. They want to enjoy themselves. They want to be involved. To be involved, you need communication. We have very
Don't forget the microphone.
Don't forget the microphone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, basically, the answer is no, we're not good enough at recruitment. Because if we were, we would have as many ringers. The Ringing Foundation was because I could see that when people came into towers, they didn't get enough satisfaction early enough from their own performance. And that was because the way we taught was a way that we allowed people to have to wait about a long time before they actually felt they got anywhere. So I think recruitment, I think we need two things. We need to expand, I'm not just talking on my own high horse, of course. We need to expand the ART training system to wider areas where we've shown that we can retain people better and give them a better time. And then we need to have a proper method of recruitment. Now that involves the image of ringing. So it gets right back to PR, and that gets right back to why we might want to be seen as a sport. Because if we're seen as a sport, that gives us raised credibility and raised perhaps access to money. But people can identify with that. They might want to join in with us more. And going back to that, everybody starts off in something as a bit of an enthusiast. And along the line, some people go up to be top in their whatever subject it is. Others go so far and then rest, and others never get terribly far. And with whatever occupation or sporting activity or part-time hobby one does, you'll have people who are mainly there to participate, people there who are mainly there to progress, and people there who are mainly there to get to the high performance. And if we need to address the fact that we can give satisfaction to each of those groups of people. They all are valuable because they all support the people just below them. So there's room for all these ideas in bell ringing.
Thank you, Pip. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, do clap. Do clap. It's not stress-free being up here, by the way. They're really put on the spot. Nigel, perhaps you could address the sort of communication angle of the recruitment and training.
Oh, well, communication's very simple. You've got the ringing world, haven't you?
The answer to all our issues.
That's obviously something that we're trying to come to terms with in the ringing world, with all the new possibilities of communication. But what I'd like to echo what Pip says to some extent. I think the problem is getting people in. ART, whatever you think about what they've developed, and I personally admire it, is looking at the process once you get people through the tower door or wherever it is that you're trying to meet them for the first time. And I feel that what the central organisation needs to be doing is to project an image that is as attractive as possible in the wider community so that people actually feel, well, that's worth having a look at. That might be worth having a go at. And I think picking up a point that I think Tina made, I think the musical image is far better. I don't see us fitting in with sort of attractive lycra-clad cyclists in terms of image, or people leaping over long jumps and high jumps and that sort of thing. So I think sport is perhaps not the right image to go for, but we need an image that is attractive, and then we can get people in through the doors, and then we can use the process of training them properly and retaining them.
Thank you, Nigel. Let's take a comment from the back. Do clap. Sorry, do clap. I don't want to stop you clapping. Let's clap after everybody speaking. Yes, exactly.
Veronica Downing. Just simply to say, in my opinion, bell ringing is not a sport. It is a performing art. And there is no reason why it couldn't go under that label. It's much more akin to making music, to performance, theatrical sometimes, but I don't see it as a physical and competitive sport, performing art for me.
Thank you. Michael.
I don't think it really matters too much whether it's a performing art or a sport or music. Can it not be all of those things? I would say gymnastics, for example, can be both a sport and a performing art. I think there is a problem that we present ringing to the public as some kind of weirdo anorak heritage activity. And I'm very concerned often when I read publicity that it has words like ancient art, old tradition, heritage. I think that presents an image of old-fashioned, irrelevant. I don't think it really matters too much whether it's a performing art or a sport or music. Can it not be all of those things? I would say gymnastics, for example, can be both a sport and a performing art. I think there is a kind of weirdo anorak heritage activity, and I'm very concerned often when I read publicity that it has words like ancient art, old tradition, heritage activity. I think that presents an image of old-fashioned, irrelevant. I don't think it really matters too much whether it's a performing art or a sport or music. Can it not be all of those things? I would say gymnastics, for example, can be both a sport and a performing art. I think there is a kind of weirdo anorak heritage activity, and I'm very concerned often when I read publicity that it has words like ancient art, old tradition, heritage activity. I think that presents an image of old-fashioned, irrelevant. I don't think it really matters too much whether it's a performing art or a sport or music. It can not be all of those things. I would say gymnastics, for example, can be both a sport and a performing art. I think there is a kind of weirdo anorak heritage activity, and I'm very concerned often when I read publicity that it has words like ancient art, old tradition, heritage activity. I think that old-fashioned, irrelevant. I don't think it really matters too much whether it's performing art or sport or music. It can not be all of those things. I would say gymnastics, for example, can be both a sport and a performing art. I think there is a kind of weirdo anorak heritage activity, and I'm very concerned often when I read publicity that it has words like ancient art, old tradition, heritage activity.
From the sport or the performing art. It's the difference between presenting material which allows us to recruit and putting up a fishing net which allows us to become fishers of ringers. Another noble religious analogy, perhaps. But I would suggest that putting out material which will resonate and which will attract people is better than just waiting to close in over the transom.
Attracting people is the theme. Thank you. Do clap. Thank you. Let's ask Chris to answer the question about should the Central Council do about it, this recruitment and training question.
It's always the Central Council's fault. Obviously, the council needs to do more to assist everybody at all levels in recruitment and retention of ringers. So in other words, I see much of the Central Council's work as providing a service in not only with communications, with innovative ways of attracting people, with publicity material, which we already do, books. There is a lot which the council can do to assist people on the ground. I think Pip hit the note about retention. It's one thing to get people across the threshold. The key thing is to maintain them. And this is where what is needed at local level is enthusiasm, encouragement, welcome to people, and the ability to advance their own personal desires, their own personal aspirations. Once they become a ringer, some don't want to go very far, but others want to go right to the stratosphere, and we must enable that. And this is where good town leadership is essential, good enthusiastic teachers are essential, which ART is contributing to tremendously. And it's really down to everybody in every town in the country to make ringing a welcoming and enjoyable activity, as indeed Mike has said.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Thank you. We'll go on neatly into the next question, actually. Clyde Whittaker. Clyde Whittaker, are you here? Thank you.
Clyde Whittaker, Middlesex County Association, London Diocesan Guild. Good afternoon. The question I have for the panel is this. Is reform of the Central Council's organisation a necessary prerequisite for future success or an unnecessary distraction from the challenges which we now face?
Thanks very much. Andrew, what's your thought on this?
Very simply, no, and it isn't a prerequisite. I can't even say it. So we better not do it. No, there's some serious issues out there, and it has taken us over 10 years to actually create a climate of opinion where people realise we've got a ringing profile problem. Going back to about 2002, I think it was, Andrew Craddock and I did a survey for the Ringing World. And in that, we started to see this age profile problem. I can remember standing at the front of council and saying, look, there's a problem coming. And there were so many heads shaking. The council everybody was in denial about it. So we invented the Ringing Trends Committee, and that's worked hard to actually produce it. Now, basically, everybody sees it and understands it. That's the first step. And it's almost leaving things too late, isn't it? Because we're inviting youngsters that can come and spend their evenings with not just their parents' generation, but in most cases their grandparents' generation. Not an attractive scenario. But since then there's been an awful lot of work gone into it. Now they're the real issues. The thing about council, we just are the representatives of the associations that should be doing the work. If it's not happening at ground level, that's where we need to look. That's where reform should be starting. Now, that'll upset a few of you, but I think you need to think about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Tina, what's your view?
Hi, I think that words are important. And I think how we describe who we are and how we describe what our objectives are also important, because that's the public face that we make to the world. So yes, I think looking at how the Central Council is organized, and is it organized in a way to be able to do the things we want it to do effectively? And if the answer is no, then we should do something about it. And it really isn't that hard. And we should change some of the ways, we should change some of the objectives, we should change some of the rules and decisions and make them less opaque and completely removed from our real experience as ringers. And that is an important thing to do. And no, it shouldn't be a distraction from the very real issues that we have. But words are important, and I think that that's also something that can be done. I don't think it's that hard with a little bit of willpower.
Shouldn't be that hard. There we go. Michael, would you like to add something to that?
I think the Central Council's is hampered by its principal objective, which is to maintain ringing as a prelude to Christian prayer and worship. And that is, I think, off-putting to people who are not Christians and are probably members of other faiths. And as Tina has just said, and I agree 100%, the Central Council's name and its stated objectives are its public face. It's what it says to the public, this is what we are about. And ringing, to survive and to grow and to prosper, needs to become multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-faith. And the council's structure, I think, needs to reflect that.
Thank you. Chris, last final word on this one. Oh, go for it. I'm open to offers.
I feel that actually when people start ringing, they don't know anything about the Central Council. So it doesn't really matter what their written down words are. I think that when they've been ringing 5 years, they don't know what the Central Council is. And probably when they've been ringing 15 years, they still don't know what it is. And there's a problem. There's a problem that we don't communicate down to our grassroots ringers. And therefore, we can't get the benefit of what we have to offer down to the grassroots. About 10 years ago, I went onto the Education Committee very naively, and I said, oh, and how do we communicate with the people that don't take the ringing world? And to be honest, that question still remains. When we can address that, we'll be in a better place to engage our ringers more. And to do that, we may have to alter the way we're structured so that we can have ringers participating in the central body, so that the money goes centrally and then back to the association and guilds, like it would in my profession, the Chartered Society. I belong to the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists, and they put me in the South Wales branch. The money follows me back down. And I think until we can get that going, we're still going to have these difficulties.
Thank you. Some practical points there. Chris, final word on that one?
Just very quickly, I think we shouldn't be afraid of change. I think often the council has been guilty of resistance to change. We do need to change the way we work. The key thing is not just rearranging the deck chairs. It's changing in a way which will make what we do more effective to help people throughout the ringing fraternity. That's what I see as our role. One thing I would say is that engagement, whether it's with across a society or even between towers locally, again, is down to local people. That's where engagement starts. It's the local tower captain making sure that his new recruits go to other churches, go to guild meetings, and realise that they are part already of a national fraternity. So it's that engagement goes right across the board.
Thank you. We're going to go on further into the communication area with the next question. So I'm going to ask it on behalf of Derek Bradshaw. Do you think that the Central Council is out of touch with the majority of ringers? And if so, what can be done about this? So that's just a further clarification on that point. And then, Pip, you had a question yourself.
Yes, I've asked...
Use the microphone, please.
I've asked, would new ringers feel more engaged and would retention be greater if new ringers received communication covering items relevant to them on a regular basis from a central ringing body? And when I asked that question, I was particularly thinking of if you had a membership fee, you would have, say, a quarterly or monthly magazine which was directed towards the people achieving their first playing course of Bob Doubles or covering for the first time, and the things that matter to the people at the lower end. Because the ringing world is very good at covering the people that it covers, but it frankly is not relevant to my father and daughter learning to ring, play and hunt in my tower at the moment, even though they've signed up for it. They're not finding it's giving them what they want. And in our ART, we have a Facebook page for ringers, and it's surprising and quite shocking the sort of things that they find interesting, which I hadn't realised. Well, such as my teacher teaches like this, and I don't seem to have done that yet. And I'm thinking, oh dear, haven't I done that yet? And so, but therefore, I'm aware of through that what their angle is. Their angle might not be whether they can strike their plain hump very well, but whether they could ring for Christmas service or something. But they come from surprisingly different places from us in the established ringing world anticipate. I think that we don't really know fully what they want because we're not engaged with them enough over a broad area. When I mean linking them all together is what I mean.
Thank you very much. Yes, so the big point there being if we're already ringing, how can we judge what non-ringers or new ringers really need and are interested in? It's virtually impossible to do.
Yeah, I think it's just having some form of communication designed for the newer ringers. Yes. That's what I'd want to see.
Nigel.
Well, I have views on communication.
Very
surprise,
good.
surprise.
Very good.
There is a lot of fragmentation in communication in the ringing exercise at the moment. And we know in the ringing world we don't meet everyone's requirements. We're taking steps to broaden our reach and so on. More of that at the AGM tomorrow. But there is because of developments in technology, there are now very, very good communications being put out regularly by associations and branches and so on. And what we are trying to do in the ringing world is to pull this together. And frankly, and I know I'm partisan, but I'd rather see, instead of further publications aimed at a small section of the audience in ringing, people contributing stuff that we can use because we have established means of communication to appeal to what people want to be reading about at all levels. And I'd like to think that people coming into ringing would not just be exposed to their immediate interests, but exposed to the whole depth and breadth of ringing as a whole, which reading something like The Ringing World would give them access to. And just looking back at the question, would new ringers feel more engaged if they receive communication covering items from a central ringing body? Only if that central ringing body has got something relevant to say to them, and I think we're all going to be debating that quite a lot over the next day or two.
So what more could be done? Central Council. Chris, do you want to answer that?
Yes, I'd just like to come in there. We've rather overlapped with what we were talking about earlier on about recruitment and retention, that engagement of new ringers and indeed existing ringers is most important. We have gone in the last 10 years through a tremendous change in communications from a technological point of view. And I won't preempt what Christopher is going to tell us about IT tomorrow and developments with the council website and with the idea of two-way communication. One of the things which some people may not know here is that back in the 1930s, there was a national register of ringers, produced in book form with addresses and contacts. Now, it would be lovely, it would be a wonderful way with modern technology if all ringers were signed up with their email addresses, their Twitter addresses, or whatever, so that we could get to everybody right across the country instantaneously. And this, of course, requires people to sign up for it, which some people in the exercise have felt uncomfortable about. But this is the way to go. National communication needs two-way national engagement, and signing up for it.
There's an idea. So we have, thank you. Do represent Chris. There's some views in the floor. Tony first, and then...
Tony Furnival, North American Guild again, I'm afraid. Andrew very kindly and wisely, I think, made the point that the place where change needs to happen is at the lower levels. And he didn't go far enough in my mind. He took it down to the associations and the guilds. I'd push it down to the tower. And not just the tower captain, every ringer in the tower. But there's no way that a central ringing organization can be responsive to that if that response is being filtered by those same organizations who apparently seem to be an obstacle at the middle level. Is it not the case that the time has come for one central membership organization, international, please, Chris, for ringers? And then we get automatically from that, we get the register of ringers, if we're allowed to put out such a thing nowadays. But more importantly, we get the ability to contact them and to conduct surveys and to develop the sort of data which the Ringing Trends Committee was effectively prevented from doing last year because there were unwarranted fears about data sharing.
Thank you. Who else would like to comment on that one?
I hear much of what Pip is saying, and remember when I was learning to ring and was, oh gosh, so excited about learning everything about ringing, and it now seems a very long time ago. I learned most of my ringing lore, and I learned about the Central Council, and I learned about the ringing world, and I learned about what my association did, and I learned about composing touches and how methods worked and all this stuff, and characters and ringings and nice stories, which may or may not have been true. I learned them all in the pub after the practice.
It seems agreement.
The question is, are we not having those conversations in the pub anymore? Or possibly, if we're pursuing, younger ringers, we can't take them to the pub to have those conversations. We have to find a different way to have those conversations. That's the best way you learn about ringing, through talking to other ringers. So that's the best thing. And another fact I just want to throw out there, I follow quite a lot of digital marketing forums. And Facebook and Twitter are being roundly abandoned by the 18 to 25 metric that every advertiser wants. So whilst ringing is reluctantly getting signed up to Facebook and Twitter, all the people we want to recruit aren't on it anymore.
It's not cool anymore. We're too late. Yes, we're too late. Yeah, Andrew.
Just a few comments. This, of course, is tied up with how we... It's one of our outputs, communication, and that takes us right back to the reform of the council and what have you. People ought to be well aware, I think, that last year at Southwark, the admin committee had a sort of brainstorming session, and it was almost took your breath away. The admin committee, almost to a man, were up for revolution. But the problem is making it happen. And an organisation that meets only once a year, getting these things moving and making them happen is difficult, and it takes time, and the time has to be measured in years. Now, we need to find some way of speeding that up, but when we talk about communication and the council's reputation, I keep pointing out to people that the word Central Council has actually become a swear word. When people talk to you in the pub about the Central Council, there's a snarl on their lips as they say it. We need to change the brand image of the council, just as one of the things we need to do. Now, the trouble is, you say branding to the Central Council, and every nerd in the place gets his pencil out and starts trying to design a new logo. And of course, it is not about that. It really isn't about that. It's about considering what your brand values are and all that sort of thing, and coming up with a new image for the council that represents all these things we're talking about. So that's just a warning. But I sense that the people in this room are up for a revolution as well. Well, I think we're all together on that, so let's do it.
Question here in the front. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Caroline Stockman. I'm from Kent, and I'm a recent learner, so I have some thoughts on what you've been saying, because I remember what it's like to be learning to ring. I think it would be immensely helpful to feel included in the early days and have something that says, oh, you're part of this greater thing, and these are some of the tips and tricks we can tell you about. I agree with Tina, you learn it from individuals, but I can well imagine, probably about 2 years into ringing, that I would have dropped away and stopped ringing until somebody did actually have some confidence in me and give me some tips and tricks. But at that time, if I heard about Central Council, I don't think I even had heard of it at that time. I've been ringing 6 years, by the way. But gradually I did hear, and then it seemed like this very elite group of people who've been ringing 50-something years, and somebody like me, because I started to learn at about 50, I'd never get anywhere. Now, okay, I've got all my foibles, but I am ringing surprise major, and I do love it, and I'm quite obsessed with my ringing. But,
well done.
But it's you, and you gradually start to learn that people are quite friendly and they all do want to help. But that's not what you get first of all, because of course you're a bit shy and you don't know how it all works. And I think and I don't really care whether it's the Central Council or the Ringing World or whatever, but I think if there are things that are relevant for people learning that can be communicated across the piece, it will encourage people at whatever age, including young people. And I also think when I look at the communications we get, I don't see the strategy behind it. I don't, and apologies, I'm going to say this quite bluntly, but I don't mean it because I do get the Ringing World and I like it, and I am a member of this and I like it, but the things I see is I don't see a clear strategy. We talk about reform, but reform to what? Okay, let's be really clear, what is it you're trying to achieve and who you're trying to reach? And the Ringing World as well, it seems to me a combination of things for people who are quite experienced, anecdotes for people who want to see their photograph in it, a list of things that you've done that's also on Bellboard. But again, if I think of if we call them grassroots people in my town and so on, they want to come along to ring on Sunday. They're not ambitious to really learn loads more, but you need them as part of to keep ringing going. Otherwise it's going to disappear to such a narrow group. But what is there for them? They don't subscribe to the Ringing World. They don't know about the council because there's nothing that's really focused on them. And I think some simple things, simple communications, helpful communications could really include people and then the word would get out more. And I think communication, I'll stop now, but communications, people you meet on the train that see your bell on you, you're going into London to ring a quarter or something, and they stop and ask you about ringing and so on. We should all be wearing stuff. We should be talking about it at every opportunity, and then it will become something. And when I started to ring, I'm Catholic, I'm just going to say Catholic, so I thought it was only the people that visited that church could do it. And I went along because I moved into a house called Bell House. And I was a professional musician in the past, and I was playing in an orchestra, and she invited me to come along. And I went along several times and spoke to her over a period of 2 years before I realised actually I would be eligible to learn. And it's that simple message that, and when I talk to people and say you could learn, they don't realise it. They don't know what it is. They don't know what we're talking about here. They have no idea. So you have to get really back to basics. Sorry for talking so long.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Lots of good stuff and ideas that I'm sure will come up again tomorrow, for instance. Let's move on to the next question, and I definitely want to cover off, by the way, I'm just giving warning to the panel, views on the idea Tony mentioned, which got some reaction there, which is the international member organisation idea. So this may come up in this section. If it doesn't, we will ask for views on that. Roger Booth, next question, please. Where are you? Wait for your microphone. He's keen.
So, Roger Booth from Docklands in London. This question is about how we make the Central Council more effective and to effect some change. So, given the success of initiatives such as the National 12 Bell, the Youth Ringing Competition, the Keltec Trust and ART, which do not directly report to the Council, do the panel agree that there is a case for externalising or devolving more of the functions currently carried out internally by the Council and its committees?
Thank you. And there's a follow-up question from Nigel.
Put very simply, should the Central Council try to lead the exercise, or just provide services to it?
Exactly. And I'm going to ask Tina to answer that one, first of all.
Both. I have more to say. You'd be surprised. I think Roger's point is very interesting. So most of the good ideas have come from somebody coming up with an idea and following it up and bringing it up into some place. And the Central Council has actually, for all the trust issues that many people have with the Central Council, and there are many, the Central Council has quite a good track record with large projects. Let's look at the Ring in the Millennium project. That was a huge amount of money that was dispersed. There was the founders money that came in with the ringing centers. There's been other projects like this, the ringing road shows. Again, that's a very large-scale project. That didn't start off with the Central Council, but the Central Council has taken it on and carried it on. And the Central Council is very good at doing that kind of thing. Now, where I think there's a difficulty is that sometimes somebody comes up with a good idea and comes to talk to somebody at the Central Council about it, and the reaction is, that's a great idea. Why haven't we thought of it? No, you can't have that idea. We're going to have that idea, and we're going to develop it. And then nothing does happen because there's only so many people, time is short, and we only meet once a year. Why, when resources short, resources scarce, we don't have a lot of ringers with a lot of time. A lot of us are time poor, and we really want to be bell ringing and not messing around with this stuff. We don't have a lot of money. We don't have a lot of time, and we shouldn't be competing for that resource with all these different organizations. And I feel, I mean, in email exchanges that I've been involved with in my past times at the Central Council, there's often a very competitive feeling about other ideas that happen externally from the council. But when you get that synergy, it's very successful. And I think that that synergy is important. And so why I think the Central Council should lead, it's in terms of creating a framework of support. Should the Central Council do everything? No, no. Find a thing that needs to be done, do the job in front of you. The Central Council should be there to have your back, to give you some support, connect you up with other people who can help you out. That is what the Central Council should be doing.
Thank you, Tina. Andrew?
Well, basically, I think the Central Council should devolve as much as it can, because there's this evidence out there that other teams of enthusiasts working on things like the National 12-Bell Contest and what have you can be very, very successful. And actually, we don't actually need to do it as a Central Council. One of the things I'd like to do is devolve the control of the laws of change ringing to a body elected by the societies that are really interested in it, because I think it's one of the things that drags the name of the council down in people's minds and involves us in a controversy which, let's face it, 90% of our members actually really haven't got a clue about and not interested, and it's not relevant to them. So there are a number of things we can do, and yes, broadly, I would agree with Roger. Let's have a bit of reform that goes in that direction, and devolve the things that we don't need to do, and concentrate on the things that we can do best.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Michael, and then Nigel.
I think one obvious transfer of responsibility from the Central Council could be, Nigel, the Ringing World, which ought to be a company limited by guarantee whose members are its subscribers. I see no point whatsoever in the Central Council being involved in it. So yes, I think the Central Council could devolve other functions. Should the council lead the exercise or just provide services to it? I think I'll put my response to that in the perfect tense. It should have led the Central Council, the exercise, but it really has failed to do so. And as Andrew said a few minutes ago, it's been messing about since 2002, trying to recognise that ringers are getting older and it should do something about it. And I think it's probably lost the plot. The Central Council does a superb job at record keeping. And I have enormous admiration for the Dove database, Tony Smith's Methods Committee database, the Biographies Committee's work. It does a splendid job at what I might, without any derogatory implications, describe as clerical functions. But it has no strategy. It has no vision. It has no leadership. It is not saying, I can see the way to go, follow us, because it just isn't. I despair. I think the Central Council should have tried to lead the exercise, but it's probably now lost its way.
Thank you. Nigel, what do you say? You asked the question.
Yes, I certainly agree with Roger Booth. I think the thing that has been missing is, and it relates to whether the Central Council should try to lead the exercise or just provide services to it, is who is initiating the various things that lead to the ringing world, I believe, had to be sort of taken over at one stage. It now operates quite independently, and it doesn't really need the backing of the Central Council. The Ringing Foundation, as I understand it, led to ART, which now lives a life of its own. So, yeah, it doesn't need interference with or governance by the Central Council, but perhaps such initiatives arising at the ground level or from the Central Council itself need to be kicked off centrally and then devolved to run on their own. While, let's be fair, the Central Council, I think, does have a role to maintain contact, unity of purpose and coordination between these various separate organisations. I think where it comes to leading the exercise, what I had particularly in mind is what we've talked about earlier, which is the image. And as has been clearly said earlier, there's a lot that we can all do and that has to be done at ground level, at association level, at tower level. But I feel there's quite a lot that needs to be done nationally to promote the image of ringing, whether sport, performing art, or whatever that we've discussed earlier. And I think there you need a central organisation. But if you think that we do need to change our image and the Central Council is the way to do it, then let's get behind it and give it the backing it needs to do this, because elsewhere in questions we've touched on, later questions, amateurism, and if we're being held back by just working with volunteers. My view is if the Central Council really going to change our image, we're going to have to pay and we're going to have professional people in doing it for us.
So let's just address then this question of international member organisation. What's the panel's view on that idea? Who would like to kick us off on that? Pip.
I feel that this, by having such an organisation, you would be able to have a membership fee which could there provide the money for professional PR, as Nigel's just said, and other things that we need. I'm not saying we shouldn't be basically a volunteer organisation, because we need to be, because we're not going to be that rich. But I do think with some more money, we could do some more things and augment the whole future of ringing.
Thank you. Michael, do you want to go next? Mike?
Chris got his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I haven't given this particular issue a lot of thought, but I agree with Pip that there is a need, perhaps, for one organisation, a direct membership organisation. I think a problem with the Central Council has, sadly, and it's not Chris's fault, a problem the Central Council has is the people who are elected to it by the diocesan guilds. And I think they are also structured often in branches. So they've not only imposed one layer of communication between the Central Council and the ringers, but two. So I can see a value in a direct membership organisation where people have a direct say in electing the officials, and there can be direct communication from the organisation to its members, and they have a subscription income with which they can get some things done. Now, how big that would be, how many members would bother to sign up and so on is conjecture, and I can't offer an opinion.
Okay, thank you. Comments from the floor there. Christopher?
Christopher Omani, ANZAB. It's absolutely ludicrous that if you look at the affiliation fee that associations pay for each of their delegates and then divide that by the total number of ringers, it's counted in pennies per year to enjoy the exercise, the fraternity, the hardware that we use day in, day out, week in, week out. Pennies. My tennis membership is a couple of £100 a year. My golf membership is a couple of £100 a year. And for the services that council can currently provide, it's expected to do it on 15p per ringer per year. It's mental.
There we go, mental.
With, you know, if we get real with that, then we've got, you know, a pot of cash for providing the services that ringers should normally expect from an organisation like this.
Thank you. Hand at the back, thank you.
Mike Chester of the Coventry Guild, hello.
Hi.
Can I ask, why does this membership organisation, which is going to get hundreds of thousands of pounds by people willing to throw 50, 70, 200 pounds at it, why does it have to be instead of the Central Council? If you think it's such a desirable thing, if you think it's something that can be done, we've just talked about Roger saying we don't have to do everything as Central Council. Could I invite those who wish to have a central organisation based on that strategy, go away and set one up?
Thank you, Mike. There's an invitation for somebody. So let's take some more comments, then we'll have Chris. Sorry, there's a hand there with the purple. Yeah.
Veronica Downing, Suffolk Guild. Suffolk Guild is very independent, actually. It has its own recruitment and training. They're producing booklets for this, that, and the other. And so that's one issue that I have, actually, this multi-strategy, multi-layered organisation that we're part of here. I'm also a member of the British Association of Shooting and Conservation, which, believe it or not, has 140,000 members. It's a national organisation with a national council. It does an awful lot with young people. It's into schools, it's running training, all the things that we want to be able to do with our performing art stroke sport. It can work. The other thing that I like about BASC is that we have a subscribers magazine. I personally believe that the ringing world should actually be the, whether it's online or whether it's printed matter, it should actually be a members' journal, which is useful at all levels, whether you have just handled a bell or whether you are Maximus or 16 bell ringer. It needs to be there as a tool as well. So, and the current ringing world isn't, and there are too many of them. So anyway, I am for revolution, and I am for a national organisation, and I don't think it needs, international organisation. I do not think that it actually needs to have an alternative. I think it should be transformed. And I understand what you're saying, Mike, but I don't think it actually needs a parallel organisation set up to go through all the heartache and the headache. We're halfway here with the views that are coming across this afternoon anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Robert Wood. I'll go there in a minute.
Thank you. Robert Wood, University of Bristol Society, although forget that, that's not important. Yes, thank you. What I get from this afternoon is that there are a lot of revolutionaries in this room, and I think that's great, and I'll throw my hat in the ring as well. But I'm thinking about a tower I went to recently, because I'm on my local branch committee. And I turn up at this 6-bell practice, and there's 8 or 10 people there, including some youngsters being taught by the tower captain. The tower captain's handling is appalling. His striking is even worse. And you can imagine what his teaching is like. There was a lady there who was taught by him, and the way she controlled her bell was to bounce it off the stay at every hand stroke. Now, great, yeah, let's have this global organisation. I'm all in favour, but how are we going to engage with that tower? And it's not just that tower, because there's one like it in every single one of your associations. In fact, there's dozens of them.
Thank you, Robert. Very good
So,
point.
yes, go for it. But you've got to get them on board. And if you don't, forget it, frankly.
Thank you, Robert. There's another comment over here. Hand's been up for a while.
Right, Mark Davis from the G&B. I think, not wanting to sound too miserable, but the idea of this international organisation sounds good, but I see in my association the people that I know, I think Andrew said that the Central Council has a bit of a dirty name, and I see people being very suspicious of central authority full stop. And if you put it to them that they should join some putative association, federation like that, a lot of people I know, a lot of my friends would not be interested in that at all. That's not to say, though, that with some transformations in whatever central organising capability we have, that the image couldn't improve and people would gradually, probably over 100 years or so, things don't move very quickly, gradually come round to that way of thinking. But in the short term, I think moving towards that too quickly, and there'd be huge resistance from a lot of the grassroots. And I think in terms of the image of the Central Council, I think that is tied up with what the image of bell ringing is. And I think the trouble is it's a very complicated thing. This whole argument about whether it's a sport or music, the thing is it's all of those things and much more. And that's why it's great. There's nothing else like it. It's maths, it's teamwork, it's physical exercise, it's music, it's beer, yes.
Don't forget the beer.
And it's the ancient law. I mean, that's wonderful. There's the ancient law all tied together with modern technology. It's absolutely miraculous, but it's a difficult sell. How do you sell something? How do you represent it? When non-ringers ask me, what do you do in your spare time? How do I portray bell ringing in all its complexity as something modern and fun and ancient and weird and mainstream all at the same time? It's really difficult. And I think maybe that's what we need to focus on, is how do we encapsulate what ringing is in a more simple message. And maybe that would tell us really what a better image for the Central Council would be.
Thank you. Thank you. Very useful. Chris Mew, what's your view on this?
Right. Well, we seem to have covered a very wide range of subjects on this, starting off with this question. I was very nervous when Roger Booth was talking about externalisation. Having worked for a public organisation all my life, I had visions of fragmentation of everything. I'd also take issue with Mike's comment about very good at keeping records. We're not just good at keeping fusty things on vellum. We actually do very good practical work in practical terms with bells, bell maintenance, insurance, safeguarding, health and safety. There are a lot of areas where the council gives solid and useful advice which goes right down to tower level. We mentioned money, and money, whether it's money or people, resources is one of the big problems, not only for the Central Council, but right down to guild level and tower level, resources. If we could get 1,000 people signed up at £50 a time to be friends of the Central Council, that would give us £50,000 to actually put into material, public relations and so on. So that would be very useful. And Mark very tellingly said about local guild attitudes to anything that smacked of international organisation. I've just taken a quote from an American magazine, which was an article about different companies cooperating, and the phrase was, "Pride in ownership is the biggest impediment to change." And this goes down to whether it's towers or local societies. It's that resistance to change which we've got to overtake, not just change in the council. And one final thing on resources. There are 200 central council members at the moment. If we delegated and said each of them should go out and be responsible for a proportion of the towers on the ground and to ensure that what's happening in those towers was the right levels of training and competence, each of you would have to look after something like 30 odd towers. Do you think you could do it? I don't think so.
Thank you. Nigel?
Yeah, if I can come back to my esteemed colleague on the committee here. You talk about if we got so many people to give us 50 quid, and Chris is bemoaning the fact that you're only giving them pence. My strong feeling, because I've heard these arguments before, is when you tell us what you're going to plan to do with money if we give it to you, if you have a detailed business plan, clear objectives expressed in practical terms, then we'll consider giving you the money.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you. Tony?
I'll back you up on that. Chris, if within 3 months you can produce in the ringing world so that everyone can see it, a plan which would spend that £50,000, I personally will guarantee you $1,000.
There's an offer. Any response to that?
Right, we'll see if we can take up that challenge. Both Christopher and myself have been in correspondence with all our committees, seeking their details of their future plans and also asking what monies they might need in the future. So that work has already been kicked off.
Can I just go? Let's go to another question. Mary Bone, where are you? Seeing as we're on the topic of money.
Right, Mary Bone, I must stress that this is a personal question. I may be the Secretary of the Council and an ex officio member of the Council thereby, but I put this in personally. And the question is just, is ringing too cheap at all levels? Discuss.
Thank you, Mary. Who wants to start? Tina.
I always have problems with a question like this because one of the things I really like about ringing is that there's equality of access and that being able to pay or not being able to pay is not a barrier. And there are times in my life when I really did not have enough money to do very much at all. And the community of ringers actually, helped me through a lot of hard times when I needed it. However, having said that, it's proven that if you're a member of the working poor, you make poor economic decisions because there just isn't enough money to cover emergencies. There isn't enough money to take a risk. And so there's not enough money to be entrepreneurial. You can't do economies of scale. So, if you're just making enough money to make ends meet, all you can do is buy washing up liquid for 5 days' worth, which is a very expensive way to buy washing up liquid. And I feel like in ringing, we make those decisions, we make poor economic decisions over and over again. We also feel that, I think a lot of people also feel very defensive about the fact, we all volunteer a lot of our time to ringing, and that if we actually paid somebody some money, there's some suspicion that they're making away with our money. And also it's a slap in the face to the rest of us who are giving their time for free. But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of people who are, maybe not very wealthy, but maybe have a bit of time or relatively time poor, that if you could just pay them something, you might be getting a very good service off somebody who's not being paid their full professional rate, but at least buys them enough time to do the job in a timely manner and in an efficient way. My daughter is a member of a running club, a Harriers club. It's a local running club. Part of her £10 a month that we pay for her to run there includes a fee to Scottish Athletics. At the level she runs at, she doesn't engage with Scottish Athletics very much, but it does buy specialized coaching in, and Scottish Athletics helps the club with recruitment. It helps them going to school. The club pays for a part-time development officer. That development officer is all over the East End of Glasgow getting kids in to run. He's paid a minimum wage, he's paid part-time. I have no doubt that he works a lot more than that, but he would not be able to do that effective a job if he weren't getting a little bit of money for it. So I think a little bit more resource sloshing around the system would be a benefit. And let me say, actually, last summer, my daughter's, she went to a sports club run by her sports club, and one of her coaches is now will be running the marathon for Team GB in Rio. So that's the kind of coaching she's getting for her £10 a month. I think that's a pretty good deal.
Thank you. Michael, is it too cheap? Or Nigel, you're closest.
Mary, the answer, yes, ringing is too cheap. I think that ringers are reluctant to pay stems out of the belfry reform movement and the obsession that we're providing a service for the church and therefore we should not have to pay any more. I support a number of charities, and I was just looking the other day in preparation for coming here at what they charge or what subscriptions I pay, and they vary from £50 for the Halle Concert Society, £42 for the National Trust for Scotland. Most of them are about £20 to £30. Camera, Fellowship of Makers of Historical Musical Instruments, and right at the bottom of the list by some margin are ART and the Scottish Association of Change Ringers, both at £5. Why is this?
Good question.
Yeah, why is this? Now, if we paid a sensible amount, £20, £30 a year, think how much more could be done. And another aspect, is where we're teaching, we seem to think we have to give free lessons. And I'm beginning to worry that this is looking downright suspicious. I brought with me some headlines from the Daily Mirror. Church bell ringer sexually abused 8-year-old boys after bribing them with cash. Victim of pervert bishop reveals how he was told to strip naked and submit to God. Now, when your teenage child pays £30 for violin lessons, £25 for football lessons, and says, "Dad, can I have bell ringing lessons?" How much are they? Well, they're free. I reckon that looks downright suspicious.
Thank you. Andrew. Thank you.
Could I? When we're talking about ringing being too cheap, one of the things that has been raised quite a lot about the future of ringing is the future of the church that houses most of our bells. And there's been quite a lot of discussion about whether ringers should be contributing to the upkeep in some way. Very difficult to estimate that. I know the costs that are involved, having been on the fabric committee of our local medieval church for many years. They're big costs. But every little helps, and community groups do make contributions for church use, and I see no reason why ringers shouldn't make a reasonable contribution for the use of the bells for non-service purposes.
Thank you. Can I have a final word from Andrew on this one? We're running out of time.
Can I just link what Nigel has said to what Michael has said? Yes, it is too cheap, but we can't expect people to pay more unless there's a plan for doing something with it. If we've got the plans there and the projects, then people will probably be prepared to support it. And it is as simple as that. There is a sort of market out there, and we're paying the market price for our ringing because it is not ambitious. It does not run a series of projects that we can support very much. And if I point out to you that Well, the average cost of a modest ring of bells is roughly half the price, the average price for a house. It just puts it on some sort of scale for you. You know, the bells we use are not that expensive in the great spectrum. So we need some projects, we need some ambitions, and perhaps we get some recruits.
Thank you. Viv, your question. Viv Nobbs, where are you?
Thank you.
Final question.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Viv Nobbs from the Winchester and Portsmouth Guild. This is a personal question in the context of being very inspired by the Wellesbourne event some years ago. And also, I want to do the very best I can to support the ringers in our towers by planning and wise use of all available resources in our area. So the question then, what positive developments have we seen since Wellesbourne?
Chris, you were there.
I was there, yes. I wasn't at the Somme, though. The answer is that there is not as much been done as one would have hoped, but there have been continuous developments, not only sort of there have been developments within the council, but also across the country. As Viv would know, following the Wellesbourne conference, we instituted a series of regional meetings where we went round with the Ringing Foundation and ART and other inputs to try to bring home and to share the experiences and challenges which were being experienced by all the societies locally. What I have seen is evidence that locally societies are doing things differently to they did 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. They are realising and restructuring how they operate in their local areas. I know a number of instances where they've had complete changes of how their guilds are run, with less business meetings and more to do with ringing, more training. There have been education and training funds set up. I know that the Winchester and Portsmouth have actually come out with what you might call a corporate plan for what they do. And there are other societies that are doing the same thing. So the message is filtering down, and I think that's one of the legacies of Wellesbourne and what's happened since. So yes, there's a long way to go, but I think that particular meeting was a catalyst for a change which is slowly filtering down at all levels.
Okay, thank you. Pip, do you want to say something?
Thank you, Alva. I'd just like to say that I also think not enough has happened after Wellesbourne. But we've had some few interesting suggestions today. To my mind, what's come out of it is we need a subscribers magazine, and we need a business plan with clear objectives, and we need some overall strategy. If we can actually get that developed, then perhaps we can go back and work out how much resources we do need, and how we can set about adding on to what we have got without destroying what we've got by replacing it with something. And I don't see why we can't go back to having a national ringers register. I don't see why we can't ask everybody that is a new ringer that joins an association for the association to inform us of their details so that they can be invited to join the Central Council and receive their subscribers magazine to communicate with the bottom end. I don't see why we can't do those sort of things without destroying what we've already got.
Thank you. So we're reaching the end of our time. Thank you very much for your participation. I just want to ask each of the panel to perhaps just give some final words of, what do you make of the ideas and things that have been coming up today? Thoughts, final thoughts. Nigel, invitation for final thought.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll all have read John Camp's interesting article about the history of revolution. He basically argues from history in our latest edition that the history of revolution is very often that it more or less goes full circle and you're back to where you started. and that evolution is better as a process. And I think that's very relevant to what we've been talking about with the Central Council. I couldn't be more supportive of proposals that the Central Council doesn't have to run everything. Stuff, once it's successful, may be initiated by the Central Council, can then go away and operate in a semi-independent existence, and that we need a business plan, and that, as Andrew was saying, if we're clear about what we're trying to achieve, then there's a much better chance that people will say, yes, I'll support it financially. And we ought to.
Thank you, Nigel. Pip, final word?
I think back to communications, Subscribers Magazine, something to get the more inexperienced ringers more involved. And I think I said in my last few words everything else.
Thank you, Pip. Michael?
Enjoy ringing. Be proud of it. Be positive about it and present it as something you do because you enjoy it. Can I don't know if any of you have bought or read, and I have nothing to do with this production and no financial interest whatsoever. Bells and Bikes by Rod Ismay is about the Tour de France in Yorkshire in 2014 and his arrangement of ringing at the places visited by the cyclists. And he makes some interesting points in it. He says, I've learned these lessons from the project. Be bold. No idea is totally stupid. Wear spots. Suits make for dull meetings. Beware committees. They can waste your time. Take risks. Comfort zones make for dull stories. Ring bells. The world likes them. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you, Michael. Really great. Thank you. Andrew?
They're not leaving us down this end with much to say, are they?
You're making it hard. It gets harder.
I'm minded from my experience with Lundy, where when you go to the tavern there, ringers fit in with other groups like the climbers, the bird watchers, the divers, and if you're all in the tavern together, mayhem breaks out. And there's something we've got in common with all those people. Ringers are enthusiasts. Now, you can hear and see that in the room today. Ringers are enthusiasts. It's one of our greatest assets. Now, there are large chunks of the ringing exercise which are just doing it for a service and not caught with the same enthusiastic bug that all of us have been. So value the enthusiasm, because that's what will drive the exercise forward for the next 100 years. It's enthusiasm, and let's get up and do things and make things happen and improve things. And you can just hear it in the air now. I think we've approached the end of an era. The old dispensation that came from Arthur Percival Hayward over 100 years ago now, that's running out. Society's changing and we've got to move on. And how we do it is always going to be a bit in the mists. We're going to feel our way forward carefully, I hope. But it's there to be taken, there to be enjoyed, and it's going to be the enthusiasm that takes us. So let's sponsor and encourage enthusiasm for ringing.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Tina?
I want to draw on many of Andrew's comments about getting things down to the local level and also Chris's comments about incremental change. If everybody in this room made a pledge over the next 12 months to do one thing to help ringing, one thing could be, I'm going to actually turn up 3 Sundays out of 4. One thing could be, I'm actually going to be on time to my local practice. One thing could be, I'm going to help my association out with their website. One thing that you can see a job in front of you that you know you could do. One small thing. If everybody does one small thing and does it over the next 12 months, a lot can be done. Find a job that's in front of you and do it.
Thank you. And Chris?
Well, there's not a lot to add, except to say that, reiterate, that it's down to all of you. We're all part of the same ringing fraternity. We all want it to succeed. But a panel of officers or a meeting of the admin committee can't achieve things on its own. We as the council rely on all of you members to not only do committee work, but to take message back to your own ringers and to where there are deficiencies in your own organisations, recognise them and see what you can contribute. And we, from our point of view, will try to support ringing at all levels. And certainly Tony has given us a challenge there. You can leave the $1,000 on the way out, Tony.
Thank you, Chris. So it remains for me to say thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much to each of our panel. You've done tremendously well. Big hand for all of them. Thank you.
We've come very neatly to the end of our time, and I think as well as congratulating the panel, I'd like to express my personal congratulations to everybody in the room. There's been some wonderful, as you say, enthusiasm, an appetite for change, which is incredibly heartening, hopefully for ringing in general, as well as for the council in particular. So once again, thank you to you for making this possible. Thank you to our panel, and if we could also put our hands together for an excellent moderator. If you do have time, and you'll possibly hear this in the IT committee report tomorrow, but in the exhibition room, there will be a rolling display of the prototype new council website, which has got a lot of communication features built into it, and you'll see that on a rolling display tomorrow in the exhibition room.
Thank you. And have fun tomorrow.